Took a minute. Hey, everybody. I know I'm a minute early. I just wanted to jump on and get things started while we wait for everybody to join. So I do appreciate everybody for coming. I'm excited to be back for Tuesday's session. So the idea is still to keep these rolling, continued. I think next week we're going to talk about using LinkedIn for learning cybersecurity, whether it's an OT ICS or even in IT or really any field. I think LinkedIn is a incredible resource that a lot of people just don't take advantage of. Where I feel like I've probably learned the most out of being in on LinkedIn and connecting and learning from others more than I've probably have in just about any course that I've ever taken. So I'm really really excited and really passionate about that. So we'll talk about that next week. So, but today I wanted to share a little bit. I've been thinking a little bit more about how I would do things differently if I was starting in OT ICS cybersecurity to today. And so I did put a few slides together. I'm also going to bring up the chat. So if have any questions as we go along, just drop them in and let me know. So hi Rudolph, thanks for coming. Crypto King is back in the house. So hope all is good over in YouTube land. So I'm glad I can see names as well because sometimes it just says like anonymous user. So no, glad you guys made it. So uh, I appreciate it. Let me share my screen because I did put some slides together for this. I guess the only problem is when I go to. I know it's horrible. I hate that one part. um, share. I can't actually see the chat, unfortunately. So I'll probably jump back and forth a little bit, but hopefully you can see that. I don't have this set up on the other machine either. I didn't come, I guess, as well prepared as I should have today. But so it says I'm sharing, so I'm going to assume uh, we can see it and that everybody can hear me okay. So just let me know if you can see everything and hear everything. I'm going to stop sharing again. If you want to say hi or drop questions in the chat, I really appreciate it. So, yeah, so from folks from a little bit all over. So Michaela, welcome. Uh, is it to Niall Salim? Hopefully, I didn't butcher that too much. So, all right. So hopefully that worked. So let me go ahead and I'm gonna try and just share the slides. It helps me see it a little bit better from that perspective. Um, okay, I got it all fixed. So again, I think I get a lot of questions, of course, for people that whether they're from IT, especially in IT cybersecurity, or folks from engineering, right? Engineering or automation, PLC techs, right, that want to learn more about doing OT or ICS cybersecurity. And sometimes I talk a little bit about my background and my story and how I got started. I got started in 2010 when Stuxnet, Word of Stuxnet came out. So I'd always been in IT cybersecurity since pretty much I was in junior high. Just always what I had wanted to do. So I've been doing IT cybersecurity for a long time. But in 2010, when Word of Stuxnet came out, I was just really fascinated with the malware that was able to not only take control over these nuclear uranium gas centrifuges out in the real world and manipulate them to where they would physically break down over time, right? Using physics against the centrifuges to break them down, but also the fact that they hid that uh, those changes in the environment to the operator. So if you're in an operator sitting in the control room, everything looked perfect. If you're looking at all the lights, And so I was really fascinated that, you could be sitting in the control room, everything looks good, while behind the scenes, these physical machines, right, were just being broken down physically, little by little. And so that's how I got started. So I started asking questions like, well, how does this work in things like power plants, and I knew some people that worked in power, so I think that's partly why my mind went there. And same with water treatment. So I knew, a guy that worked at the local water uh, treatment facility. So I, would start to, reach out and ask about, well, how does this work? And how, do we have computers in these types of facilities, right? And how do they work? And how are you protecting them? And nobody wanted to have those conversations. And I realized after a while that it wasn't that they necessarily didn't want to have the conversations. I was very personally offended. But it was really just a matter of they weren't doing anything for cybersecurity. They didn't even really know what cybersecurity was. So, I was all gung ho about cybersecurity from the IT side. And I was like, I'm sure cybersecurity this, cybersecurity that, and then here I'm coming to them and saying, well, what are you doing about cybersecurity? How does this work in a power plant? And they were like, well, buddy, we don't, we're not doing anything there. Uh, and yeah, it took me a little while to realize. And so when I started looking for resources out there at the time, there just weren't any. There were a few that were just starting, right? And that's about the time I think like the SANS community was starting with Mike Asante and Rob Lee and Tim Conway and others, and a few others out in the field, but that was it, right? And there were some, small groups like ISA, which is the main group around engineers. Of course, that's the U.S. based entity, um, and so there were some folks out, there having conversations, and so there were just little groups. And when I say little, I mean you're talking, 5, 10 people, and there were very few groups around the world. So we've come a long way in a very short amount of time. You think the last 15 years since news of Stuxnet had come out. So that's really amazing to see. But we have a long way to go, right? And to be able to go even further, right? We need more people in the field, especially those that believe in the mission about protecting those services that we rely on in our daily lives, right? Keeping our families and our friends, our communities safe. And it doesn't matter where you live, right? It's we all want the same thing. And so yeah, that's kind of my path. I was just very frustrated, trying to get started. And then I would get a little momentum, and then it would just be like, it would all go away. Then I get a little momentum, and it would all go away. Right? So it's a big reason why I post on YouTube and LinkedIn. So we'll actually talk about some of those resources uh, as well. Right. So yeah, so no, I appreciate everybody for coming. Crypto King has a, let's see, random question. What do you believe is some of the better software for OT threat and assessment visibility? So I try to stay vendor agnostic um, for the most part. So I will say, typically when you talk about threat and asset visibility, a lot of that kind of comes in at the same time with network security monitoring. So, because those features are really built into the same platforms. So the big three are going to be Dragos, Clarity, and Nozomi. And I think, you know, they roughly kind of, play in the same space, have mostly the same features. Some, companies have additional services that wrap around that platform, right? Some are stronger in other, like threat intelligence versus others, but those are the big three: Dragos, Nozomi, and Clarity. So hopefully that answers the question. Um, do you recommend oil and gas OT courses, or what do you recommend for oil and gas OT cybersecurity courses? Yeah, there's nothing necessarily specific to oil and gas, but what you'll see is, and it's kind of an interesting question. We'll come back and we'll answer that maybe a little bit more when we talk about courses next. And certifications kind of falls in the same thing. It is rare to find courses that are specific to an industry or a specific sector. Now that is changing for sure. So if you can find one specific to oil and gas and it's written by someone that has that experience in securing oil and gas environments, for at least some time, I sounds like a great investment. Just like you were seeing, courses just for manufacturing. Maritime is becoming a big topic of conversation these days as well. So you'll see that. But yeah. So, so let's jump in and I'll come back to questions. So again, if you have questions, throw them in the chat. Uh, but you look at, again, some of the things that I would do if I was starting over, or if I was starting today and wanted to learn more about OT, ICS, cybersecurity. So these were the five main points that I wanted to focus on. There's definitely some others to talk about, but I think they all kind of trace back to these five things. And the nice thing is with this, I know at least for myself being very introverted, like I think a lot of people in technical fields are, not everybody, but I would say more than not, that uh, these are all things that you can work uh, on your own, and you don't necessarily have to be a social creature, right? We do talk about joining the community. Even then, though, you don't necessarily really have to put yourself out there. I think the more that you do, the more you take out of it. But at the end of the day, again, I completely understand if that's just doesn't feel right for you. I was talking not long ago about I would go to cybersecurity conferences at 45 and not talk to anybody. So things have changed in a short amount of time, right? So free courses, there are some free courses out there around OT, ICS, cybersecurity that didn't exist a couple of years ago. So, and I'm not sure when CISA had actually started their courses. I think I became aware of them 2 or 3 years before COVID, and then and what you'll see with the CISA courses, they're all free. They're all written primarily by engineers that have worked in the field, which is really great to have that type of experience. There's basically, I think of them as in four levels. Kind of, there's like a 100 and 200. So those are all the free online courses that you can take. All kind of the mostly the beginner to starting to get into intermediate topics. Yeah, that's the way I look at it. And then they have a 300 and a 400. In fact, they actually just added a new 300 course. So these are courses that I think there are virtual versions that they have put together because of COVID, but to really take advantage of them, you actually go out to Idaho National Labs, which is in Idaho in the United States. It's kind of northwest-ish, and but kind of also in the central portion of the United States for those that aren't familiar. Um, and you actually go out to INL, which is an incredible facility, and actually get real hands-on experience doing things like defending towns, right? Mock town from cyber attacks, right? And so it's really exciting. They do a lot of work. I was supposed to go out, and then COVID hit, and so I've just never had the opportunity to make that trip, but hopefully one day. So I always hear great things. I see the posts on LinkedIn. I get very jealous of folks that are able to do that. So definitely take advantage of at least all the online courses that they have, and then if you're able to make the trip, even so much. And they do like traveling shows to hit different areas. I think it's primarily in the United States. That so you don't if you can't travel to Idaho, maybe you can at least hit up one of the more regional shows that they have every year. So, and then of course I have my YouTube channel. The reason why I wrote this course was this was the class I wish I had before going and doing something like taking the SANS GICSP course. because there's a lot you get in the SANS GICSP course, right? And they always talk about drinking from the fire hose when you take a SANS course, and it's true, right? You're just sitting there and just absorbing just a ton of information all day long, right? And if you're doing that, right, you're not getting everything, right, if you don't go in, or at least, kinda understanding the basics. And I had a basic idea, but I still felt, in some parts of the course, a little bit more overwhelmed, um, than others, for sure, because it was, like, 50% about OT, ICS, cybersecurity, and engineering, so I felt a little bit more overwhelmed in that section, and then there was more stuff that was relatable to IT cybersecurity. I was like, oh, okay, I know all this. So, and that's what this course is. It is, talks about, IT cybersecurity concepts, but how we apply those to the OT or the ICS world, and how we can take engineering concepts and, of course, OT ICS assets, and how they're used and how we protect them. And then talks about how IT cybersecurity and OT cybersecurity are different, right? Because they are much more similar than people will say. Some people say they're nothing alike. I'm like, that's not true. They're very much alike, right? It's just where they're different. You need to understand where they're different, right? And um, how to apply that and make sure that we keep people safe, right? We don't want anybody getting hurt. We want to make sure the plant stays up and running. Okay. So that's my first suggestion: is take advantage of the free courses that are out there. Definitely take advantage of the CISA courses. You don't have to be a U.S. citizen or anything to take these. At least anything online, I believe. There might be requirements if you go to the INL training on site. I'm just thinking because it's a national lab, a lot of times, sometimes those are limited to U.S. citizens, but definitely check the website. So, and then of course YouTube, it's free. You can watch it anywhere in the world, I believe. So, or find a way. So, definitely. And I have other courses there as well. And this one's it's actually about 26 hours, all the way through the end to act as a solid introduction. So, know a few of you here have actually uh, watched it, so and sent me notes. So I appreciate that. I actually got to the Atlanta ICS conference that Security Week puts on last week, and met quite a few people that had actually taken the course, and more than a few folks that had said it helped them get a job, which was really exciting. That's everything to me, honestly. So. Um, Let's see. Crypto King asks, are any of those three able to pull all the PLC HMI with the network mapping and updated CVs? Oh, so we're talking about network security monitoring tools like Drago's Clarity, Nozomi. Let's see. Are any of those able to pull the PLC HMI with network mapping and up? Yeah, it's typically a big focus for those platforms. So it's not only network security monitoring, but really to do network security monitoring, right? We have to understand what's in the environment. I will say I'm not as familiar with Nozomi and Clarity as I am with the Dragos platform. So that probably tells you a little bit which way I lean. But so, a big part of that is, yeah, understanding what you have in the environment, and based off, oh, I have this PLC or I have this HMI. Now, we're talking these protocols, what assets are talking, which protocols, what commands are talking, from system to system, but then also understanding, oh, based off of the firmware running on this asset, right? What CVEs, right? What vulnerabilities exist. And then, right, also some platforms also try to help you understand what does that risk really mean in your environment, right? If you have a CVE, right, you have a vulnerability of a critical risk of a 10, right, the worst of the worst. In your environment, it might not actually mean anything. You might not ever have to touch it. And that's where I think sometimes things get lost when you translate this idea of CVEs from the IT cyber world into OT or ICS. So you have to work with the right folk, work with your engineers to get in there and determine, what applies to us in our environment. And one environment, that 10 could mean a 10, and you got to bring down the environment in a maintenance window and get it patched much sooner than in some environments, you'll never do anything with it. So hopefully that answers the question. Hey Charlie, what's going on? Long time no see. So Rudolph's done mostly all the sessions. Very cool, very cool. Not sure if Sissa or you two or both. So, so Daniel Salim, all the way from Iraq. So thanks for watching. I appreciate that. Um, and then Ravindra, 3010. That's thanks for watching the course. I appreciate that. I kind of treat it as more the basic like introduction, and then you can build from there. So. Have you tried Sweeper for OT asset management? I have not. When we talk about, I think Land Sweeper is more, if I remember right, because I think I have seen it in the IT world, that it's very much an active scanner. We typically don't like to use like full-blown active scanners to scan an OT or ICS environment because there's the potential for delaying network activity, communication, which could interrupt at things like availability, cost, system, uh, or safety issues. You could crash systems potentially. Those things are becoming less and less, but I still talk with people almost on a weekly basis where they still introduce those types of issues. So active scanning is usually full active scanning is usually not going to be recommended in any OT or ICS environment, right? But every environment's unique. So you really need to sit down with the engineers, the operators, and the environment to understand how it works and what's going to work best in that environment. But so, yeah, I would have to check it out. Yeah, I didn't know they had an OT module. I'll have to reach out and double check. I suspect, like a lot of OT, type of those solutions, they do what they call active probing. So instead of trying to do like a full port scan of every IP address, you might, just try to test specific protocols associated with or ports associated with OT protocols, things like Modbus or DMP3 or S7. You can also pull, there are some protocols that do come over into OT like SNMP, right? SNMP, right? I see runs on things like Siemens equipment, like Siemens PLCs by default, with the public community string of public, of course. So you could connect that and to be able to gain information about that asset. So, but no, I appreciate you mentioning it. I'll check it out and look at the OT. I just haven't heard of anybody actually using it for OT. I see. I'm sure somebody is. So, but I appreciate that. So. Um, Danny asked, what kind of OT cybersecurity do you recommend? Um, well, I recommend having it in the first place. So I do actually, I'm doing a webinar for CSA tomorrow that actually talks about mainly the first 5 steps to OT or ICS cybersecurity that I focus on. And then it actually expands into the top 10. There's even a lot more, but maybe we have some time. We can talk a little bit about that. But yeah, if anything, if you go back and watch the YouTube course that I have, that it talks about each of those areas. So everything from things like backup and recovery, which a lot of environments still don't do a good job of. We see that with Jaguar Land Rover, right? In their massive outage. It's like I think they're saying up to $2.5 billion now. Those types of things. Um, so Dragos looks familiar to Tenna. A lot of them have a lot of similarities, right? Because they're doing um, kind of similar things for sure. Um, Tenable OT was it was Tenable bought Ingenie, if I'm saying it right. Um, a platform they brought to make their OT platform. So, and I've known some folks that use it. They got a little concerned because Tenable laid off pretty much like all of their OT people, though. So the I don't know. I guess there's a lot of questions on what's happening with OT and ICS at Tenable these days. So, but that's just what I've heard. So yeah, for sure. Learning definitely never ends, right? We can never stop. So, so let me go back to number two, and then we'll come back. And if you have more questions, drop them in the chat, right? But yeah, the first thing to focus on is free courses, right? You can't beat the course or the price. So between CISA and the YouTube channel that I have and some of the courses that I've put out. I also talk about being part of the community overall. And this is something that normally I wouldn't think about, especially a couple years ago, being the extreme introvert that I am. But at the same time, it's the one thing that has really helped accelerate not only my knowledge but my career opportunities, or potential not only to learn things and earn money, but really to even just become a better person. And that might sound silly to some people. I get it. I would probably think I was crazy if I was listening to this, of even a few years ago, right? But just the work that through LinkedIn that I've been doing for a little over two years now, and YouTube, right? It just really has opened up not only so many different doors, but and I've got to meet so many different people. But it's just being able to learn, right? Even just you just sit and listen, you can learn so much, right, from all of these, kind of thought leaders and gurus, in any field. I just happen to focus on OT or ICS cybersecurity, but you can learn so much about anything, not only on YouTube, right, where you can go and search out videos, but there's just so much on LinkedIn. And when people get into discussions, and I would say constructive discussions in the comments, right, you can just, I mean, they're complete master classes on any aspect really of life even. Right, it doesn't even have to be a technical field like OT or ICS cybersecurity. So, but I did put this list together, and I try to get as many people, you can say as many people on this list as possible. And this is really the more active people on LinkedIn. I know there's a lot of great practitioners out there and people running and securing plans that they aren't on this list, and they just, it's probably because they're not very active on LinkedIn in particular, right? I'm not on X or Instagram or TikTok. But if you're using LinkedIn and you want folks that are active and to just people that, like, really respect everybody on this list. I wouldn't have them on here if if I didn't. But not just that, but you can learn so much from them. This is kind of, I guess, the cream of the crop, if you want. And again, there's a lot of other people out there as well. This is just my list to help get you started. Right? A lot of these folks are really good friends these days as well, which is another thing I owe to LinkedIn. So, but definitely check out that list. It's also on my site. So if you go to mikeholcomb.com, and if you go to resources, I have like all the infographics that I've created on LinkedIn there in just one page. And they're the more high res versions as well. So you can go there and download them. So, so definitely check out that list. So, um, talk about reading research, but let me go jump back and see if there's any other questions. So Farron Perry says, I'm thinking about building a home project with Raspberry Pi or Arduino. How much do you think this could help me as a beginner? So one thing I would say is, so doing the Raspberry Pis and Arduinos can be very cost effective way to do that. I know for myself, those typically tend to be a little bit more frustrating. You just have to have, at least for me, I need the extra time to be able to work with the Raspberry Pis and the Arduinos. It just takes me a little longer to get them up and running. Um, with that said, if you're looking at doing something physical, I do suggest people actually look at the Click PLC line at automationdirect.com. You can get a fully loaded PLC for about 400. I know that's not free, but it's an option. I also have a lot of free virtualized environments, and you can also check out virtualized environments like LabShock, GRFICS as well. I'll put them in the chat. So check out then so LabShock from Zachar Bernhardt, and then GRFICS from David. Uh, what's David's? I just saw David. I know Fortified is his company. Um, Hornsby. It would come to me originally. So they have a new version of GRFICS. So it's not only can you remotely interact with things like PLCs using OT protocols like Modbus, but you can also they actually have a graphical engine where you can walk through the plant and do a physical security audit. So do you see a door propped open, which happens a lot in plants, unfortunately? Do you find passwords written down? Those types of things. And so it's kind of cool that they put those together, and both of those are all Dockerized, so they don't take up a ton of resources. So they're usually really easy to get up and running. So yeah, so you can do the Raspberry Pi, the Arduinos. Again, sometimes they're a little less effective, I think, but they're a good start. Again, Click PLCs, and they're all the PLCs that SANS uses in all of their courses. Again, they're about $400 fully loaded, which is really cool. Um, and then again, there's a lot of virtual environments now that didn't exist a year ago. So like LabShock and the new version of GRFICS. I just wish he had a different name. So Jose mentions spoke at the Tenable conference and said that they want to build up. Yeah, I understand that, like, a lot of the vendors, these days are struggling in this place because they're all kind of fighting over the same customers. And I don't pretend to know what's going on behind the scenes at Tenable. I just know, a lot of people had got let go, and so it did raise a lot of questions um, in their customers. But hopefully, I'm still a big Tenable fan. Um, you know, just in general. I've been using Nessus since before I think Tenable was a thing. So, um, so it's like various learning Tenable and Sentinel, Sentinel-1, Linux, Windows, PowerShell, and now, yeah, KQL. Yeah, if you're doing anything in Sentinel or Windows Defender and doing the queries, yeah, for sure. I'm not a query guru, but I love Copilot, where using Gen AI, say, hey, I need a query to look for this type of activity, and having one to work. So it's very cool. Definitely doesn't hurt knowing the basics. Says this to go her says getting a job in anything IT really in the US has become very difficult. Is Yeah, it's very difficult. But yeah, projects are a great way to stand out from hiring managers. When you tell them, "Hey, this is your home lab, this is what you have set up," they get really excited to see that. Another thing to think about also, and I know I always suggest this, and people kind of blow it off, and I get it. I would have a couple years ago, but if you start posting regularly on LinkedIn about just the things that you're learning and the things you are doing, those are things that hiring managers look at, and it definitely gives you a huge leg up over other people. Again, I know it's going to fall on deaf ears. I never would have taken that advice like 3 4 years ago, but definitely um it's one of the best things I can tell you. So Danny actually learn virtual PLC programming. So it's a good idea to understand the basics of PLC programming. That's I am not a master PLC programmer. I was thinking about doing maybe like a quick intro course. It's good to understand the basics, but you don't need to understand more than that to do OT ICS cybersecurity, unless that you're going to get into doing response and forensics around that. So there definitely is a place for that. I think that's a very specific niche, though. Same thing like with programming, DCS, distributed control systems. And so, kind of, in larger OT or ICS environments. So it's good to understand the basics, but to work in OT, IT, ICS, cybersecurity, it's not a hard requirement. But again, good to know the basics, right? So. All right, so let me go back because I did want to talk about a few more items. So read the research. There's a lot of great companies out there that release research. Now I always talk about the 2 year in review reports. I suggest everybody reads. So one's the Dragos year in review report. That's the one. If you're in OT or ICS cybersecurity, you should be reading this every single year. There's just really so much great information, not only about known breaches that happen in the industrial world, but also, across the Dragos customers, right? What are they seeing when they go in to do response or they go in to do pen test, right? What are they seeing? And they bring all that together. Of course, they anonymize it and make that information available to the community. Right? There's a lot that really jumps out, especially this year. There were a couple where my jaw dropped. So, like one was, they talked about it was like 65% of OT environments had active SSH connections to the internet, uh, which is really concerning. And I'm sure some of those were set up by engineers or outside consultants that were, kind of authorized to work in the plant, sure, but some of those were more than likely, of course, attackers as well. So things like that. And I do talk about the Verizon data breach investigations report because now that focuses on IT breaches. But remember, most breaches or incidents in the OT world, they come from IT. So it's a good, you know, way to understand, hey, what's going on in the IT world, especially if you're in the OT side of things. Right. So it's still a good idea to understand what's going on in the IT part of the world because it does impact you if you're in OT or ICS. So there's you're starting to see more companies in OT or ICS cybersecurity do year in review reports. I've started to look at a few. Some are better than others. There was one, I'm not naming names, but they just kind of interviewed um, like their customers, and like their customers think very highly of themselves because it was like a very high number. Thought they were very secure. That just didn't kind of align right. They're I think they're very blind and not realistic to what's in their environment. So but again, that's their opinion, but I'm looking for more kind of I'm a very practical person, right? I want information that I can use to help me do my job better, which is ultimately making my environment secure, right? Hearing that your customers think they're secure, that doesn't help me in any stretch of the imagination. So um, so yeah, Drago's here in review, Verizon data breach, Mandiant. They have their M trends, so they still tend to be more kind of IT, but there's definitely a lot of crossover. They do a lot of great work in the OT ICS space as well. So I also any of their research or their blogs that they produce definitely definitely suggest checking those out as well. Right. Um, Nancy asked, "Are SEM products used much in OTS? I know they're big in embedded." Well, one thing to think about is, with uh, a lot of OT or ICS is embedded systems, right? So when we think of everything from network infrastructure, so network switches and firewalls to PLCs, right? These are all embedded systems. So, thanks, Jose. Thanks for coming. I appreciate that. Um, see, Farron says, I thought about going to Trident Tech in Charleston. I know a few of the folks down there. Yeah, I'm up in Greenville, so I know more of the, Greenville Technical College stuff. Automate controls there, but what companies down here in the Holy City hiring for OT? Uh, yeah, that's the thing. Especially in the Carolinas, and this is really everywhere, right? Though when you think about it, manufacturing is probably the most opportunities for jobs, right? The problem is manufacturing is also very behind in cybersecurity. So in a lot of manufacturing, you have, they might not even have an IT cybersecurity team, or if they have an IT cybersecurity team, the IT cybersecurity team is being tasked with overseeing OT cybersecurity. So a lot of times, and I know this sounds weird, but a lot of times the way to get an OT cybersecurity job is to get a job with a company that does IT cybersecurity, but also has an OT or ICS component like manufacturing, power, like water treatment. So you go to work on the IT side and say, "Hey, I'm really interested in OT, right? I want to secure, the operations of the company." And then over time, you can move over. And that actually has worked for more than a few people. I kind of think of it as how even I started at Floor like 15 years ago. I started on the IT cyber side, but then you started talking with the engineers, and then they're like, "Oh, you're interested in engineering, right? And oh, OT or ICS or we call control systems, cybersecurity, right? Like, oh, okay, well, hey, come help us out." And then it's like, "Oh, can you help us out with these different projects, right?" And it just builds. So yeah, hopefully that helps. But yeah, unfortunately, and best thing I can also say is if you're looking for a role right now, you can start reaching out to people through LinkedIn that are in your area that might know of roles, and also talk with recruiters. Recruiters are the ones that are going to know what does the market look like, right? What who's hiring, right? Do you have those qualifications that they're looking for, right? Those types of things. So definitely be sure to check those out. So, Sandra asked how many resources are companies dedicated to IoT, OT in terms of, yeah, you could probably get an idea from what I was just talking about. Not a lot in general. That's starting to change and that's starting to grow. But yeah, other than the larger entities like in oil and gas, right? And power. Oil and gas, they've always been really good at cybersecurity because think they lose a lot of money if they go down. And they lose a lot of money. And then obviously they don't want people getting hurt or killed, but if they had a plant go down, it could be millions or tens of millions a day. Right? So they invest. Right. And I work with some of the largest oil and gas, Saudi Aramco, Shell, BP, out there. Most environments though are just like we're talking manufacturing. I work with some manufacturers that on my side consulting that they're just getting up and running, right? So it's very much like IT cybersecurity was kind of like 10, 15 years ago, right? Because a lot of environments they need OT cybersecurity, but they're not doing anything about it yet. It's changing, right? And that's kind of where again it's like IT cybersecurity was 10, 15 years ago. Yeah. And there's a whole other like 400-hour conversation there to be had. But so and then is compliance driving activities inside organizations. And I know you mentioned IoT. Remember, IoT and OT are very different. I know there's a lot of kind of they can maybe seem like the same thing, but I think usually IoT is still kind of more. I still think of them as more like home devices. Sometimes yes, they work into the work environment, and there is definitely some blurred lines there where OT is more equipment that's controlling things, moving in the real world, right? And compliance does help, but just remember, there's not a lot of compliance around OT or ICS cybersecurity. So we're really looking at power generation and transmission in North America under NERC and FERC. That's and that's pretty much it. So if you're in a nuclear power plant, if you're in a traditional power plant, right? If you're pushing power, down huge transmission lines and through substations, you have to be compliant. Those compliance requirements are still a little light. It's kind of like the original PCI for credit card companies. That it's just they can do a lot more, and some companies do a lot more. Like I've worked with some power companies that they go above and beyond, because like the oil and gas companies, they don't want to go down because of a cyber attack, right? And want to make sure everybody stays safe. So, all right. Let me jump back to the slide and I'll come back to the other questions. So, talking about reading the research. Now, this is a big one for me because I did, focus on the same in IT cybersecurity because I could learn how to kind of prevent attackers from getting into an environment. But I always had this question of, well, what if an attacker gets in the environment and then like how like what do they do once they're inside the environment, right? And that was really I needed to understand that because that's what I was protecting against. So that was really cool when MITRE ATT&CK had first come out, because MITRE ATT&CK for they call it for enterprise or for IT, right? It was once an attacker's in your environment, what do they do? Right, because that's the activities, or they call them tactics and techniques, and we're talking about procedures that they use once they get inside the environment. So MITRE ATT&CK also exists for ICS, and MITRE had developed this mostly with folks at Dragos, and I'm sure some others, but the way it was explained, it was mostly with Dragos and MITRE working together to build out. And you can see at the top we have these tactics, right? And there's kind of these big categories that are broken down into these techniques, right? How an attacker, right, be able to once they're inside the environment, we talk about how they conduct things like discovery and collection. And you can see there's a discovery column, there's a collection column, right? And then where they can do things like, oh, can I find a programmable logic controller sitting on the network, and then can I connect to it over an authenticated protocol like Modbus, right? So that means I'm not asked for a username and password, and then I can manipulate values in memory, which can manipulate the actual process that that system is controlling. Kind of think back to those nuclear centrifuges we were talking about with Stuxnet. And so all of that's explained. And if you click into each one of these, then it brings up the procedure. So it tells you a little bit more in detail, okay, what this really means. And it gives you some real world examples of here's where this was exploited in this incident, whether it was 6 months ago or 10 years ago, but it gives you those examples. So this is all rooted not just in like academic research, but these are things that have happened in the real world. When I teach my OT pen testing course, then a lot of it comes from MITRE ATT&CK. Because I used to say, oh, we're going to go to all the research, right? So when Dragos released research on an attack, or Mandiant released research on attack, awesome, right? So I always take that. But then MITRE ATT&CK for ICS came out. It's like, oh, it's kind of like all in one place. So this is a great resource. But again, the idea is to learn about how attackers do what they do, especially once they're inside the environment, so that we know how better to defend against them, right? And I do have the intro to OT ICS pen testing course on linked YouTube, and I have taught it a couple times live. I just actually did a 6-hour workshop down at the Atlanta conference last week. Had a great time. The first four parts of the course are out. I'm about to do part 5. Hopefully tomorrow. If not tomorrow, it'll be out on Thursday. So stay tuned. So the first 4 parts are kind of the introduction and overview, and then part 5 it starts walking through kind of basically each one of these, but in a little I try to make it a little bit more simple and a little bit more practical, because that's what I'm all about. So, but learn what attackers do and how. Again, that's what we're trying to protect against. Right? Let me go back to the questions real quick. Um, see. So slash GH says hello. ICS OT over at ABB, or engineer maybe on ABB systems. But you mentioned a IT background. So would it? So would IT red team search like OSCP or something advanced like? Yeah, actually, we're going to talk about certifications in a second. So kind of put a pin in that one, and we'll actually come right back to that for sure. It's a good idea to hack the company to show the impact, and they will hire. No, no, especially in the OT or ICS world. Um, you have to I take a very strong stance in if you don't have authorization, you shouldn't touch someone else's systems. It's breaking most laws. Some environments, there aren't any laws, or there's a lot of gray area. Just ethically, it's just not a road you want to go down to. I would never hire somebody that has said, "Hey, I broke into your environment, give me a job." Right? That would be very, very rare. Right. So, if that's kind of something you want to pursue, you want to look at things like bug bounty programs. So that way you have authorization to try to break into these companies. And then if you find vulnerabilities, then you get paid. Right. That's just a very, unique kind of like, case related to like pen testing. Um, but, you're paid by, the work. And there are a few people that make a lot of money. They are very good at that. I think those people are few and far between, though. So I think a lot of people do bug bounty, but don't really. They spend a lot of time and just don't get a lot out of it, unfortunately. So, but no, it's never a good idea to hack any company unless you have permission or authorization. Sure, you're doing bug bounty or you're a pen tester, but then at that point, right, you are already hired to do that job. So. Um, just applied for oh yeah, internship at Charleston Water System. Oh, very cool. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, good luck. Let us know how that goes. I would say I've had a lot of people reach out and they said they've had really good luck going through interviews and getting internships and full-time jobs after they watched my uh, getting started in OT ICS cybersecurity course. So if you haven't, watched it or finished it, I think you have mentioned you had, but if not, definitely check it out. So definitely. And then crypto says it could be more right about manufacturing, trying to, yeah, a lot of them, yeah, they're just playing catch up. Um, they haven't been doing anything for OT cybersecurity. A lot of them haven't been even doing anything for IT cybersecurity. So sometimes I'm amazed at some of the environments I go into, and it's like they haven't had like major problems. They've still had probably some problems. Like they have a plant that goes down because of ransomware. Um, and it still kind of makes them but I don't know, it just seems like you would think they would take cybersecurity more seriously then, but it's still, I think it's a lack of awareness and education. It really is, an understanding, right, what they need to do. That's why I talk a lot, on just these are the basic things to do. That's why, and it has the acronym BASIC, backup and recovery, right? Asset management, secure network architecture, incident response planning, and continuous vulnerability management, right? Just those five things alone will greatly reduce your risk. And then my next five are start. So it's basic start, which I'm like, yeah, that works out. So that's my webinar I'm doing for CSA tomorrow. So if anybody's interested, it's 1 p.m. tomorrow Eastern, and you can find the link in my LinkedIn post. So definitely check it out. Yeah, thanks for coming, Amps. I appreciate it. So I'm not sure about where the financial expirations are coming from, but uh, Gurpreet, but yeah, maybe that was something else. But where can you see the conferences that you attend? Yeah, if you sign up for my newsletter and you go to mikeholcomb.com, you can find the sign up. So I do a weekly newsletter. Right, about 6,600 folks, which is really awesome. And the very last part of that, I actually put in the conferences that I'm going to be at. So of course we have besides ICS coming up in Miami with S4 in February. There's Level Zero coming up in April. I'm already waiting for DEF CON next year in August. So, but all right. So I'll come back to the questions. I want to finish up though with my last tip, and this is more for folks that are looking at getting that first role in OT or ICS cybersecurity. And that mostly come from an IT cybersecurity background. Right? If you're coming from an engineering background, um, a lot of times it's not seen as a necessity unless, and I was saying this is, kind of from my day job, was unless you had a client asking for it. Right? I got to work with 4,000 electrical and control system engineers, right? And there were some that had some basic certifications, and they either did that because it was just something they wanted to do on their own. The company wasn't reimbursing them, right? It wasn't sanctioned by the company, even though it should be, right? And or a client was asking for those certifications. And so, but especially if you're coming from IT and IT side, excuse me, cybersecurity. So I did put this one chart together to kind of give a lay of the land. I did also want to talk about SecOT Plus. This is a fake logo that I put together. Probably what it's going to look like, but so they had just met in early October to start writing the exam, and then they go through like 2 or 3 more phases where they bring together the team. I think it's like 20, 30 people, all very, well-known, respected practitioners to create the exam. I know, friends with more than a few folks that sit in the group, and the exam probably in beta will be out in like probably June, July next year, I think is kind of the best guess. So, because it still takes a lot to go through and make sure that the certification has the right tone and it's hitting the right level, that it's writing the questions and testing the questions and all of that. So, so it'll be a great certification. I think, especially for folks either that are engineering or OT that want to learn more about OT or ICS cybersecurity, and those coming from an IT cybersecurity background like myself. So there are two main tracks of certifications right now. So SecOT, again, that's next year. Um, so a lot of people will tend to towards SANS and ISAC 62443. A lot of it just happens, it just deals with your budget, because SANS courses are expensive, right? There's no getting around that. The GICSP course, right? That's kind of the intro to OT ICS, but that it's one of those where a hiring manager sees that and they understand what that certification is. It's like, boom, we want you. Grid, right? That's, to me, that's my favorite class of all time. And just getting to listen to Rob talk about, yeah, he's taking very, what you think is very complex or complicated or complex environments, like how do we secure these, and breaking it down to very basic, practical, simple terms, right? He just takes the complex and makes it easy to understand, right? And so Grid is a phenomenal course. I always say my favorite course probably of all times, at least in the technical field, right? It's just it's expensive. Yeah, they're very expensive. So it's priced out of most people on the planet, right? Um, so if you don't have the budget for SANS, then your next step is going to be ISA IEC 62443. So I think SANS classes right now are like $11,000 US. It's a lot of money. Um, with ISA IEC 62443, those um, they have 4 exams, right? They're about, and I haven't looked at the price, but it was, I think, when I took them. Well, think last I saw was like 1,600 ish for a class. You can get some discounts, like if you're an ISA member. So definitely become an ISA member if you're going to, because it'll pay for itself. But the to take one of the exams, you have to take the class. So that's the only bad thing about it, is they make you take the class to take the exam, right? So there's no getting away from the course fee, and then the course the exam fee is free. right? If you take all four of their courses and certification exams, then you become what they call a ISA IEC 624 for the cybersecurity expert. Doesn't make you an expert in anything, right? That's, I go with, I think Malcolm Gladwell said, you need 10,000 plus hours working, right? Hands on in a field to become considered an expert, right? But these are a good start. If anything, if you're trying to get that foot in the door, kind of the equivalent of what I guess SecOT plus would be. The very first exam is that green one, the cybersecurity fundamental specialist. Just take that one, and that already shows, hey, I'm passionate about OT, ICS cybersecurity. I have a basic level of understanding, right? And I'm ready for the next step. Right? So I definitely did want to put those out. So yeah, getting certified is not everything, right? And it doesn't replace hands-on experience, no. But especially like me, if you're coming from IT cybersecurity, right, to be able to get your foot in the door to get that experience, the certifications go a long way, along with some of the other things that we talked about, like someone doing a home lab, right? That's another big one that a lot of people don't think about. Posting on LinkedIn, right? Your hiring managers could definitely be looking at LinkedIn. Make LinkedIn like your profile page, right? Treat it like your resume. More hiring managers are probably looking at that than they are your resume, right, these days. So I appreciate. I'll hang out for a little while, some time to answer questions for folks that want to hang out. But if you're looking for me, like if we haven't connected on LinkedIn, feel free to reach out and connect. You can find all my resources at mikeholcomb.com. Get all my infographics are there. Special thanks to my girlfriend that that did that. There's my email, get the YouTube channel, and GitHub as well. So I'll jump back and look at some of the questions. Um, so me Gurpreet asked for share the link. I'm not sure which link you're asking, but let me know what you're looking for, and I'll can put whatever in the chat. Um, if you're in NERC environment, you'll have to learn how to build rules for detection. Now that network, yeah, I was very glad. Yeah, Kevin mentions, yeah, NERC is that's the regulation for power generation and power transmission in North America, right? So if you have a power plant in North America, you have to follow these basic requirements. They're kind of basic, but they try to improve them over time. And they had just about a year or so ago, maybe a little less, had added the requirement for network security monitoring, which is awesome because very few environments do network security monitoring. Like Rob Lee at Trago says that he's got tells them, but he sees a lot, probably more than anybody, that about 5% of global OT environments actually do network security monitoring, and then I would say probably half of those don't do a very good job. So, but yeah. So NERCSIP is uh, getting better. Yeah, some bug bounties don't even pay out. I've yeah, I can't. I'll talk about my like old job, but yeah. Like someone had mentioned, like, oh yeah, you can do do a bug bounty, like give people authorization to do things like try to find vulnerabilities in your website, and then at the same time like don't pay that, like give them a T-shirt or something like, and that's just yeah, that's not great. Is it worth moving from IT to OT ICS cybersecurity? That's a question that only you can answer for yourself. If if you're only looking at doing it for making more money, it's probably not the right move for you. OT typically tends to make less than IT. That's changing, but in general, right, typically will make less. Um, if you believe in the mission of, you go to work in securing a power plant, right? And it's all about making sure the community has power to, for families and friends and right to be able to live, right? And supply power to things like hospitals and the water treatment facilities and the farms, right? And the food manufacturing plants that we need, right? Everything else, everything relies on electricity. So if you believe in that mission, then OTICS, cybersecurity is the place for you. Yeah, and there could be other reasons as well, but a big driver for a lot of people is money, and I get that. I just remember, yeah, it's if money is what you're after, OTICS cybersecurity is probably not going to be the right fit for you. So. Um, Crypto said we're overhead and don't make them money, Mike. You know this. Yeah, that's kind of the with IT and OT. Thankfully, that is changing, right? Even executives, leadership are starting. And I'd say this has really heavily evolved over the last couple of years, especially since COVID. Not related, just they're realizing, that cybersecurity teams, right? They can prevent the bad things from happening. And if an incident like Jaguar Land Rover, right, lost $2 billion because of their incident, like they can realize, yeah, we probably probably should have invested a little bit more in the team, right? So um, yeah, this automatically is since it's streaming on YouTube, it will actually automatically post under the live section on YouTube as well. And then it kind of stays on LinkedIn for a little while, but I'm not 100% sure on how long it stays there. But it's easier just to find it on my YouTube channel. So for sure. So 404, thanks for coming from Brazil and Nuru. Thanks for coming. So I appreciate that. So yeah. Um, and yeah, it's right. It's always hard trying to get that job without. Yeah, it's always right. How do I get a job? I need experience. How do I get the experience to get the job? Yeah. It's so that's why I've always been, internships, volunteer. Right, volunteer is a way to get experience. You might not get paid, right? It's volunteer, but you can actually, work to um, you know, get that experience to put on your resume. So, can you make exams on your website? So, I'm not sure where you're going with that, Danny. I do study guides as far as like the YouTube videos. So I just started, or not too long ago, doing kind of study videos for that go with the 62443 exams. So you can definitely check those out. And then what can OT offer you? More freedom or money? Yeah, it's definitely not more money typically. And some people would say not any freedom because a lot of the positions, especially at first, if you're getting into the field, are going to be on site. So you're not going to be looking at working from home. So but anyways, so again, I appreciate everybody for coming. Again, just a quick recap. Some of those ways that if I was starting out again today, I would definitely consider checking out the free courses, right? Like CISA or CISA, or on my YouTube channel, right? Just look for Mike Holcomb or Utilsec, right? Join the communities, and we can talk about, there's a lot of great conferences out there, but also just the community on LinkedIn is just amazing. I've learned more from the folks on LinkedIn than anywhere else, honestly. So read the research from companies like Dragos, Mandiant, and Verizon, right? Learn how attackers are attacking OT or ICS, right? MITRE ATT&CK is great for that. MITRE ATT&CK for ICS. So, and I do have my pen test course. Again, port 5 should be out tomorrow or Thursday, and look at those certifications for sure. So again, I appreciate everybody for coming. Again, you know where to find me. So drop me a line, connect on LinkedIn, and I'll see hopefully everybody next Tuesday at 12 o'clock Eastern. So